Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
1,700 miles off the coast of Taiwan, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, Melvin Kwek is hard at work at the Guam Power Authority, or GPA.
My role is the Chief Information Technology Officer for Guam Power Authority.
A few months ago, he showed Bloomberg reporter Katrina Manson around.
So where are we now?
We're going to the Power System Control Center.
GPA is the only power utility on the small tropical island. In addition to the roughly 600,000 tourists who flock there for its white sand beaches each year, Guam is home to about 170,000 people, and over 21,000 of them are U.S. service members and their families. Nearly a third of the island is taken up by Air Force, Marines, naval, and other military bases. Everyone on the island depends on GPA power, including the military.
They're one of our top customers. We supply constant and reliable power to them.
6 years into the job, Melvin was pretty happy with his work. He'd made progress on connecting GPA's customers to a remote digital grid. But in 2022, U.S. federal agents came knocking. It seemed they wanted to check GPA's network for signs of foul play. The U.S. government is increasingly concerned about hackers getting access to civilian critical systems that the U.S. military relies on, particularly hackers from China. In recent weeks, U.S. officials say Chinese hackers infiltrated Treasury Department computers, and a state-sponsored Chinese hacking campaign breached 9 telecommunications firms. Some officials have been raising the alarm for the past year or so that hackers may have already breached systems in Guam and are preparing for an attack, not just on its data, but on its critical infrastructure. The island, which is a U.S. territory, is 3 times closer to Shanghai than it is to Los Angeles. So for Melvin and his 4-person cybersecurity team, keeping the lights on is a matter of national security.
If China has access to this, then that would be a really bad situation because then they could disrupt communications.
And do you have the sense that you are a target for China?
Oh, I'm sure we are. We see on our network every day multiple IPs trying to come in, trying to get into our network.
Do you feel like you've got it under control?
I hope so.
This is the Big Take DC from Bloomberg News. I'm David Gura. Today on the show, inside the cybersecurity threats that are impacting Guam and what's at stake for the rest of the country if the U.S. government's worst fears about the island's vulnerabilities come true. To understand Guam's significance to the U.S. right now, it's important to understand how it's related to the ongoing conflict between China and Taiwan. For decades, China has claimed Taiwan as part of its territory and denied the island's self-governing status. China's President Xi Jinping has said he wants his military to be capable of taking Taiwan by 2027, without saying that he intends to do so by then. According to Bloomberg's Katrina Manson, if China tried to invade Taiwan, Guam could be a kind of staging post for the U.S. to push back if it decided to. Katrina says one Washington think tank has gamed out what could happen.
In 24 out of the 24 scenarios, they modeled China sends a missile direct to Guam. And in fact, these missiles are nicknamed the Guam killer. North Korea has them, China has them. The point is they can reach Guam. So Guam is a target. And of course, for the island, that's very fraught.
Guam holds a lot of strategic importance to the U.S. It's the country's westernmost point. The U.S. is building a new Marine base there and planning a network of missile defense systems. The island is often considered by military strategists as a critical piece of U.S. influence in Asia. And the people who live there often feel that geopolitical pressure.
There are people that are concerned about increased militarization here.
That's Guam's governor, Lourdes Aflagui Leon Guerrero.
Guam geographically is in a line of commerce and trade in the waters. And superpowers are fighting for that control.
But beyond Guam's geographically vulnerable position, Governor Guerrero told Katrina there's another concern at the top of her mind.
My biggest priority is cybersecurity.
And she isn't alone. A missile strike is a concern, but
Rear Admiral Huffman, who's the top military commander on the island, told me, we think cyber attacks are more likely. This is a more effective way to undermine the US military's ability to move about, to stage any kind of defense or deterrent posture when it comes to Taiwan.
Cyber threats on the island aren't just theoretical. There's one campaign that has experts particularly concerned. Researchers have dubbed it Volt Typhoon. Katrina says cybersecurity experts first noticed it in 2021 when Microsoft researchers were investigating a cyber attack on a port in Texas.
And several months later, in January 2022, they started seeing similarities at a telecommunications company on Guam. And then they kept pulling on the thread, and in summer that year, there was another telco that seemed to have been affected by the same thing. And then some other security researchers saw that this same kind of pattern was occurring on the Guam government's network and also another ISP. So there was a particular concentration on telecommunications companies on Guam, and that started to get people thinking.
Thinking about why hackers might want to infiltrate Guam systems and what they could do if they decided to exploit that access. Volt Typhoon is not focused on stealing data like a typical hack you might imagine. Instead, its hackers are targeting operational technology systems. Think water systems, satellites, and rail lines. They're gaining access to these systems that control critical infrastructure, and they're just waiting. But for what?
Eventually, the government came to the conclusion that these hackers were there waiting for the moment that it might be useful to disrupt services. So you can disrupt a network and take data from a network. That's usually used for spying. Or you can try and move over to what's called the operational technology system and actually stop something from moving. Stop the sewage from working in the right way, poison the water, interrupt electricity supply, stop phones from working. These are the absolute daily pieces of critical infrastructure that daily life relies on. And also so do military bases, because maybe you can't go up against a military in war, but maybe you can undermine every single thing about how they work.
And in a moment of crisis, like a potential invasion of Taiwan, those systems going down could compromise the U.S. ability to react.
And I think as we've seen with the invasion of Ukraine, whether you are able to achieve your target or not may or may not come down to how quickly you can mobilize your forces. And so the idea that in the American mind, China might be able to impede a US military response simply by undermining its own ability to move a military, because you can't call your forces, you can't get the planes going, you can't refuel them. Any of those things would be potentially very significant.
The U.S. has concluded that China was to blame for the hacking campaign, but it hasn't shared much information publicly about how it came to that conclusion.
They've laid the blame at China. What has China said in reply?
China has for years denied doing any kind of hacking campaigns of this sort. China has said, actually, this is ransomware actors, this is not us, and absolutely denied it. And in fact said the US is making these claims just to try and convince Congress to send funding their way.
With the threat of a large-scale Volt Typhoon attack on Guam looming, what are lawmakers in the U.S. doing to prevent the worst? That is after the break. U.S. officials are worried that Guam could face a crippling cyber attack that would put everything from its infrastructure to military capability in danger. They've been sounding the alarm about an ongoing hacking campaign dubbed Volt Typhoon. Bloomberg reporting found that the U.S. has already discovered more than 100 intrusions across the country connected to the wide-ranging campaign. And some cybersecurity experts say these hackers are slowly making their way into Guam systems, waiting for the right moment to attack.
The US has been very front forward about briefing Congress, about telling the security community, please go look for this, and we need your help to see where it may be, because it won't interrupt your systems until it's too late. So almost a year after Volt Typhoon was announced to the world, a series of intelligence chiefs briefed Congress in January 2024 saying this could be an everything, everywhere, all at once scenario.
Here's Jen Easterly, director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, testifying in front of Congress.
This is a world where a major crisis halfway across the planet could well endanger the lives of Americans here at home through the disruption of our pipelines, the severing of our telecommunications, the pollution of our water facilities, the crippling of our transportation modes, all to ensure that they can incite societal panic and chaos and to deter our ability to marshal military might and civilian will.
It really is the stuff of movies, the idea that not just electricity, but also hospitals, also telecommunications, every single element that our lives rely on could go wrong. And their point is, please check your systems. Please work with us. Please let us check your systems. We really need to find this, and it's very difficult to find.
The way Guam's networks are set up makes it particularly difficult. They're run by a patchwork of privately owned companies. Some of these companies, like Guam Power Authority, have been cooperating with the federal government. But Katrina says companies are not always eager to invite the FBI to snoop around their systems, especially when the government isn't forthcoming with information about these threats because of security and legal concerns.
U.S. intelligence officials make the point we are not able to get onto domestic networks. We cannot find where the enemy, the adversary may be. We need private companies to do that. They own the domestic networks. And so there's a real appeal to private companies, which are often small, under-resourced, are not thinking in terms of national security. What on earth should we do and why should we do it? And even the governor complained to me. I asked for a briefing. I asked Microsoft. I asked the government, I asked the telecommunications companies what has happened. And she said they shrugged it off. They said something happened, but everything's fine now.
They were very mum about it, really. There was never any briefing. It was, yes, it happened, but we've addressed it.
And so even for the people whose job it is to come up with these plans, they often don't have the full picture. And that kind of coordination, I think, has proved really tricky.
With Donald Trump's return to the White House, U.S.-China relations and the government's approach to cybersecurity could be set to change. I asked Katrina what that might mean for Guam and the threat of Volt Typhoon.
I think it'll be really interesting to see how the Trump administration handles the entire question of Taiwan. This is an administration that has said it really believes in deterrence. It wants to make a big point with the U.S. military. It doesn't want wars, but clearly President-elect Trump has said he wants the U.S. military to be the most lethal in the world. And he's very focused on China, obviously. So I think the idea that these kind of cyber threats will continue is clear, and wrangling this relationship between the private sector and the government interest will continue to be difficult. And of course, the Trump administration also doesn't really like regulation. So the idea that you'll be able to compel companies to participate also seems quite remote. To me, I would imagine it remains rather difficult for national security people to get what they want in Guam.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
This is the Big Take DC from Bloomberg News. I'm David Gura. This episode was produced by Julia Press. It was edited by Aaron Edwards, Joshua Brewstein, Andrew Martin, and Nick Wadhams. It was mixed and sound designed by Alex Segura, fact-checked by Adriana Tapia. Our senior producer is Naomi Shavin. Our senior editor is Elizabeth Ponso. Our executive producer is Nicole Beamsterboer. Sage Bauman is Bloomberg's head of podcasts. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe and review the Big Take DC wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps people find the show. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.